Hi everyone.
Hello.
Sorry,
Hi.
I'm just gonna request all of you to put yourselves on mute if you're not talking. Thank you. Welcome to the first Careers in Public Policy Spotlight on IIC. This is the first in our series, and we have Ms. Shriya Lal Sethi with us. She is the Country Director for International Innovation Corps, funded by U Chicago Trust. She's been in the space for a while now, and under her leadership, U Chicago Trust and IIC under the umbrella has been doing phenomenal work with multiple state and central ministries, spanning around Ministry of Health, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Niti Aayog, amongst a few. So as I am pretty sure most of us might already know, IIC is a coveted fellowship program in our country. And the impact they have been making, especially during the pandemic as well, has been phenomenal. Our scholars have gone on to work under Ms. Sethi and her team, and they say that it has been one of the most life-changing experiences for them. So absolutely honored to have you here, Ms. Sethi, and over to you. Before we begin, a couple of housekeeping rules, folks. If you have a question, please raise your hand. We are going to keep some time towards the end of the session for you to place your questions forward. If you're not talking, please ensure that you're on mute so that presentation can go on smoothly. Thank you. Over to you, Ms. Sethi.
Thank you, Mayuri, and thank you so much, ISPP, for always inviting us to give this talk. I see Gopi's here as well, so hi, Gopi. ISPPs and IIC is very closely related because Louis, who is a close alum and a friend, is obviously one of the founders of ISPP, and we have a very strong U Chicago connection. So we're always happy to participate in any programming that ISPP is doing. So Mayuri introduced a little bit, so what I would love to do today is just give a little bit of a background about myself and my journey here, and then just talk about the two different programs actually that we now run, the International Innovation Corps, as well as the Young Leaders in Tech Policy. I'll try to go through them fairly quickly so that there is a little bit of, there's about half an hour left of interactive time. Anybody has questions, feel free to drop them in the chat box, but also feel free to just, unmute yourselves and take time out to chat. So I had a very unconventional journey to the development social sector, so to say. I began my career as an exporter. I joined the family business and spent 5 years in very hardcore manufacturing, making fashion accessories. We had a factory that we ran in India, and we were exporting all over Europe. And then, about 5 years into that business, I decided I'd like to go for higher education and went to do my master's at the University of Chicago at the Booth School of Business. While we were there, I think, almost everybody was trying to get jobs in consulting or in investment banking. And I was fortunate enough to get a job with McKinsey in their Chicago office right after graduation, where I spent about 1.5 years, which I thought was just a fabulous experience as well. I learned a lot about consulting, about project management, about problem solving. But post that, I decided to move back to India for various different reasons. And, once I was back here, I spent a year with Honeywell in internal strategy. So I really did, I did entrepreneurship, I did consulting, I did corporate. But all of those things, there was something that was kind of missing, right? I mean, it was all very exciting work, and I was enjoying myself. But at the end of the day, the question always to me was, why am I spending so much time, increasing some organizations' bottom line? What is all of this leading to? Really, what is the personal satisfaction I'm getting out of all of this work? So when this opportunity came through the University of Chicago Alumni Network, that there was social impact fellowship that the university had started in India, and they were looking at somebody to help them manage and grow this fellowship, I thought was a really interesting opportunity to make a change into a more impactful career. So about 4.5 years ago, I joined the International Innovation Corps. And really, the last 4 years has been really one of the most impactful periods of my life. I've just had the most incredible amount of fun. We've had the most incredible learning journey. The experiences has not been really restricted to any one sector or any one field of work. I worked across education, health, gender, tech, water, sanitation, really got a very good overview of how the development sector in India works, but also had the opportunity to work at the state governments and the central governments, with districts, with multiple different foundations, as well as really large-scale NGOs such as Seva Bharat. So all of those experiences is really helped me understand, where the challenges are, but also where the opportunities are, what makes the development sector in India click, where we can add value, right? Where are the gaps? And one of the most impactful things that I felt like happened to me over the last few years is, we've always viewed the government as an outsider. So we've always said, and it's very easy for us to sit outside the system and criticize every single thing the government does and say, they could have just done this better. It's just common sense. But once you kind of work within the system, you understand the complexity of every single decision and what are the kind of nuances that each decision needs to be thought through before it's taken. So that understanding, I think, is important. And that's really essentially what we are trying to offer. Our perspective is that by the end of the fellowship, every single fellow that's been at ISC should, at the basic, understand what it means, what governance means, what it means to work within the government, how Indian government is structured, and how to kind of work within the system to get change done. So now I'm going to just walk a little bit through the actual, the program, and then, love to talk more about my own experiences and everybody has questions. And Mayuri, let me know if you can see this. Yeah. So the International Innovation Corps, as Mayuri mentioned, is essentially a University of Chicago program. It's affiliated to the Harris School of Public Policy at the University of Chicago, and you can see this, right? Yeah.
Yes, perfect.
Great. In India, we operate out of the University of Chicago Trust, which is a wholly owned non-profit by the University of Chicago. Yeah. The idea of ISC essentially came up because there were a lot of University of Chicago professors that would do large-scale research in India. But very often when they went and interacted with government partners and, told them about their research and findings and said, when you are developing large-scale problems, why don't you look to incorporate some of our findings? The most common answer seemed to be that we don't have the time to do this, right? Or we don't have the human resources to do this. So why don't you also provide us some human resources? So this is where Professor Anup Palani, who's the founder of IIC, came up with the idea that, we need to create a fellowship that works closely with different government entities to provide them the human capital resource required to do deep research, deep data analysis before large-scale programs are designed, right? So at that point of time, how do we bring in international best practices? How do we bring in the right set of experts? How do we bring in concepts of sustainability and scalability into the program design so that, 2 years down, 3 years down the line, the programs aren't struggling to be sustainable or to grow. So I think it's almost 7 years ago now that the program was set up. We're on to, I think, our 9th cohort at this point of time. We have applications that open every March. The applications are roughly open for about 6 weeks. It's a global application pool. The last 2 years have been a little tough on us, and we have a lot of international applications. But traditionally, we would have about 30% of applications be international students. People apply from all kinds of backgrounds. So we have people in our cohort who are lawyers, who are, bankers, consultants, public policy professionals, doctors. And I think the mix of people coming from very different backgrounds to address one single problem is really what makes the entire fellowship such an exciting place to be. Once they go through the application process, all these fellows are divided into, put into teams of 3 to 4, and then embedded into government departments. So, you could be embedded into a central or a state government department, and you would work within that particular department for a period of up to a year, sometimes 18 months to 2 years as well. And you would work very closely with senior bureaucrats within that particular government department, helping them solve for some really large-scale problems. And I'll give you some examples as we go along. Yeah. So as I was saying, this is a little bit of our journey. We started in 2014 with just 3 projects and 15 fellows. And I think at this point in time, we're close to something like 45 fellows. Last year, we also started another program called the Young Leaders in Tech Policy. And a little bit towards the end, I'll take 5 minutes to talk about that as well. But it's a program that complements our essential governance program very well. Just want to skip through this. Just sorry, I feel like this is not the thing. Yeah. So IIC essentially believes we have 2 mission statements, right? The first one is to work with government partners to drive more impactful and more systematic programs. And this is really by bringing in the right set of research, the right set of experts, working on large-scale data analysis while those programs are being designed, right? Helping the government think through all the important things that they need to, and then, helping them also structure that in a way that is easy to understand and easy to communicate. An example of this would be right now we have a team at the Ministry of Information Technology, and the thing that they were asked to work on was helping design India's National Center for AI, right? And then what essentially the team would do is that we would study what other countries have national AI programs. What do those programs look at? What are the needs they address, right? We would break them down into components and say, wait, which of these could happen in India? And if they were to happen in India, what would they look like? Then we would hold consultation meetings with all the different experts that are working in the field of AI in India, both in the in the public sector, in the private sector, academics, practitioners, anybody that's associated with this field. And then we would get their feedback and say, wait, if you had to design this, what would you think about, right? Taking all that information together, we came up with a set of structure that said, if India was to have a national AI center, these are the 4 pillars it should have on. Under each of these pillars, these are the programs it should do. To get to this level, this is XYZ that we need to do, right? And then we presented that to the ministry in a very easy to understand way, which then they could, absorb and then take it forward to the people that have to take the decision to make this happen. And we're very close to having this launch sometime this year. So that's just an overview of how we would push through some, best practice thinking and get expert opinions at the time that large-scale programs are being designed. So we currently, I think this is a little bit dated, but we currently work across 10 different projects. We have a lot of projects currently actually in the space of health, considering just, the situation of the country and the world today. We've been working really closely with the Ministry of Health in the last few years. We did a lot of work with them on e-health programs, but more recently, we've been working with them on a lot of urban health programs, like really trying to understand, really coming from the COVID pandemic and saying, since COVID was really seen as fundamentally urban disease, really where was the gap, right? Why couldn't we identify this earlier? Why couldn't we put systems of containment in place earlier? And then what models could possibly work? And then can we actually create pilots in these models? So we are going to be working really closely with the Ministry of Health, with NITI Aayog, as well as a few cities to implement fairly large-scale urban health project in the next few years. We've also been working really closely with the National Health Authority in the last few years. And one of the very, interesting new things that this country is going through is the digital transformation. And, the National Digital Health Mission is really in the forefront of that. And IIC has been, very much a part of the program management team for that. Similarly, we've had projects with NITI Aayog, National Institute of Urban Affairs. We worked in education in multiple different states. It could be on programs which are on edtech procurement, it could be on Diksha platform adoption programs, or it could be on a basic assessment of, doing just a deep dive diagnostic with the state and understanding what needs to happen for improvement in student outcomes. We also work across the way we're structured. We actually work with multiple different foundations who partner with us for these programs. And as of right now, we have partners such as the Rockefeller Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Media Network, the Vatmani Foundation. We really kind of work with almost all the leading international foundations in the country. But the bigger mission that I believe in, and the one that we really feel strongly is the core mission of IIC, is to develop the next generation of development leaders for this country. We invest a lot of what we do into really really grooming and helping individuals grow, giving them the right set of skills, training, support that is required for them to excel. So while we have a structure which is, that there is a lot of management support, there is an engagement manager for every project, there is a country director, there are experts. The idea is that the people on the project are driving the project, right? There is a lot of independence, there is a lot of growth opportunities. And what we do is we provide a lot of training and structure and support to people on the project. Over the last few years, again, I think this is a little dated, but maybe we have close to 200 alumni at this point of time. And one of the things that we're very proud of is about 70 to 75% of them continue to stay in the sector. There's some people who choose to, take on different jobs, but the number of people that have stayed on in the sector, in fact, at this point of time, if I look across the development sector in India, there's practically hard to find organizations that don't have an ISC alum working in them, which is, just a really great place for us to be. Typically post IIC, either fellows go to study, and they would go to study their public policy or public administration programs globally. And these are some of the schools that recently fellows have been accepted at, or very often they get absorbed within some of the organizations that they've been working with. So we've had people get absorbed into NITI Aayog or National Health Authority, but we've also had people work at the PCG Social Impact Practice, ID Insights, Vadhani AI. In fact, even some of the foundations, right? So Rockefeller Foundation, we had a team that was working with the Rockefeller Foundation, and then they made an offer to the fellows that were working with them, and now they're working with the Rockefeller Foundation. So we have a fairly wide array of where IIC fellows go. And what's also interesting, because then they have alumni that, when you're thinking about your next career move and you want to think about what works or doesn't work, you have alumni in almost every sector in the space today that you can reach out to and understand more about that sector. So I'm just going to walk through a couple of different projects, and happy to deep dive into this later if needed. This is just a very sectoral overview. We, like I said earlier, we've done projects across practically every sector. And we've also basically had a very healthy mix of projects between central and state government. Unfortunately, I think for the last year or so, a lot more of our projects have been at the central level, but we do like working at the state level because we feel like that's where the implementation happens. It's a lot of policy design at the center, but you really want to make impact and you really want to push through actual change. That's when you should work at the state. Education, health, gender, urban are some of the core areas that we've been working at. We've had multiple projects across all of these areas. But what we really have realized over the last few years is that the underlying focus on almost all of these projects has been technology and data. There has been this, digital transformation that has happened in this country over the last few years, but there's also been this mindset change within the government partners that technology, to some extent is a solution to almost every single problem that exists. So we've had multiple different projects that we worked across education, health, gender, urban, and in fact, just core technology, where we've been where we work with the government department on how technology can be used to solve for some of these problems. However, I think where we come in very, very strongly, and as I see, we believe very strongly, is that technology isn't the solution to everything. And the blind use of technology in certain situations can actually create more of a problem. So whenever we're working on technology programs and whenever we're working in tech policy programs, one of the things we always need to push for, and the thinking is this technology the right solution? Who are you developing the technology for? Can we put the person and the problem at the center, and then design the technology for them, rather than first design the technology and say, wait, now who should use this? Which is unfortunately a lot of what happens in the country today. So the change that we're trying to bring into the system and the thinking that we're bringing into the system is that technology is the enabler, it's not the solution, right? Like think about the solution and then think that if technology is that fits into that solution. And that's the kind of thinking that we would like our IIC fellows to kind of, imbibe within their system. So no matter what they do going forward in the future, they're always questioning and saying that, this might seem the most obvious solution, but really who is it for, right? Can we have the people that we're designing these solutions for at the center and then think about the impact of that? So like I said, right, I think if you want to work, if anybody wants to work in the development sector in the country today, the government is just really such a large part of the sector, right? And then to understand how government works, no matter what you want to do post, the 5 years later, 10 years later down the line, in all probability, at some point of time, you would be interacting with the government. It's very hard to function in this country in the development sector without working with the government, right? But having to understand how the government functions, right? Why some of these decisions are taken, what are the complexity of the roles? That's really what we want you to get at the end of this 1 year experience. So an unparalleled government experience is exactly what we're trying to understand, right? You might say that, oh, I didn't really achieve what the project set out to do. You might say that, we weren't successful in the metrics we set for ourselves. But one thing is for sure, by the time you graduate from IISc fellowship, you would understand what governance is and how governments in India function. Some of the other things I mentioned, right? You would have a very large IISc alumni network that you can reach out to. We do a lot of alumni events. We do a lot of peer-to-peer learning events. You would have access to a lot of experts and partners that we have on board with IISc, and you would just also get to be part of the University of Chicago alumni. Training is incredibly important to IISc. We focus a lot on it. We have a core vertical around this, and our training is different, right? We actually never do training around the space of core technical things, right? So we won't train you on public health. We won't train you on education or tech or data. We would train you on how to be leaders. That is really what's important to us. We would train you on things like empathy. We would train you on like, how do you give feedback and how do you listen? Because to us, we feel like those are very ignored things, and that is what sets IISc fellows apart, because IISc fellows will come in with a lot of empathy and understanding. They'll sit, they'll listen to you, they'll really try to understand the problem and then design the solution, right? They're not coming with a one solution fits all attitude at all. And those are the things that we concentrate in at training. We try to help you think through how to organize a large scale event, keeping in mind the different people that need to be involved, right? There were a lot of events that happened today in the country, and we're like, wait, almost everybody on that panel is the exact same profile, right? How is that going to be an interesting conversation? So how do you think about developing interesting and facilitating interesting conversations? We push people to write a lot, and we actually have host writing workshops around it, because we think it's an important aspect of your development that you should be able to write well and communicate well. Take your thoughts, put it on a piece of paper, and how do you communicate that, right? So those are the things that we concentrate on, and there's a lot of mentoring around this and a lot of support, and not just in professional development and training. What we also do is that each project has a project lead who is somebody who's been at IISc for a year. So there's a lot of learning on the project and this constant feedback provided. And then each project is supported by an engagement manager who oversees 2 to 3 projects, who's again, an industry expert who's been in the industry for say 10 years. And then I'm there, right? So there's a constant structure that's working with you, and a lot of the job of the management at every level is really to help you think through and design what is it that you want to do, right? Rather than telling you, this is what you need to do. So this is just an idea, but I mean, this is early. Happy to kind of talk about these things later when we open application in actually, unfortunately, almost a year from now. So that's the IISc fellowship. I'm going to take a little bit of time to talk about the YLT program, which unfortunately we just closed applications for this, and we're not really looking to have YLT fellows on board for at least a year. But it's just an interesting new fellowship, and I'd love to just take 5 minutes to talk about this. So, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the work we've been doing has been in the space of tech and data, and what that fundamentally made us realize is that while the government is moving towards a lot of digital innovation and developing digitization and tech products for education, health, water, data, everything, they are not at the same point of time creating a cadre of professionals that understand data or tech policy, right? And that's going to become a gap going forward. And how do we already anticipate that gap and create leaders for the tech policy space that are able to understand both the opportunities, but also the limitations of technology, right? And are able to help create those policies that will govern technology development in the future. So Medyar and I, IISc came together to develop this fellowship. And this is why we did it. So the overview is that it works slightly differently from the IISc fellowship, because this fellowship works with a host of tech policy think tanks, where we embed our fellows within that tech policy think tank for a period of 2 years, where they are assured mentorship by some of the sharpest minds in the tech policy space today, and then groomed by them to actually understand core tech policy issues and do some deep research or implementation of tech policy. At the same time, what IISc does with them is that we have very, very structured tech policy training programs where we are inviting some of the top minds in the country and globally to talk to these young professionals every second week, right? And help them think through any questions that they might have, but like really push their thinking, make them question why, give them exposure to all different kinds of thinking. So while you might be interacting with somebody who's very, conservative in their thinking, like say IT for change and why technology is a solution, at the same time, we would also expose you to the tech policy professional who works at Facebook, who'll tell you about, how Facebook thinks about technology, right? And social media and protection, privacy rights, etc. So the contrasting thinking around both of these spaces is exactly what we're trying to get our tech policy fellows to think about. Like I said, it's slightly different. It works in 2 years, works with only one host organization, and they work on both policy and implementation. I think I talked about most of these things. They go through very similar kind of a process of selection with a behavioral interview and a host interview. And then just going to give you a little bit of an overview of the current host organization. So this was actually for the first year, and we've just closed our second round, and next week we'll be announcing our next set of hosts as well. But for the first year, we had Civic Data Labs, Giga Foundations, Foundation for Ecological Security, and IP for Change. Similar, what is it that we're looking for? We're looking for just really bright people who can question, who can think a little bit about, like I said, the limitations of technology and be able to question some of these things. What could you possibly do after this? You could, again, go get an NPP like a lot of the ISC fellows do, but you could also work, you could set up your own tech policy think tank, you could work at the tech policy team of a Google or Facebook or Amazon, or you could join your host organization as a full-time employee. Practically everything is open for you at that point. Similar to ISC, we have very, very structured training programs. It's actually slightly more intensive at YLT because we basically push you to think a little bit more, and we host training sessions every second week. The only caveat here is that this program, the way it's currently designed, actually only applies to engineers. ISC is open to anybody with a minimum of 2 years of work experience. As of right now, YLT is structured to only be open to people with an engineering degree. So I'm not going to go through this. We're a little bit early for this. And these are all last year's questions. Let's stop there and see if there are any questions for you. Happy to talk about anything, happy to talk about my experiences, happy to talk about the program. If you have questions, I believe Mayuri, everybody's just starting off their careers. This is, just they've just joined ISPP, so if they have questions or thoughts about, what it takes to succeed in the public policy world or what does it mean, I'm happy to discuss any of them. And please feel free to unmute and ask, or to put it down in chat as you're comfortable. Yes, please go to Jaspreet.
Hello, ma'am, can you see me?
Yes.
Okay. Ma'am, I'd like to ask about the YLT, Young Leaders Tech Policy. The eligibility criteria is that only engineers can apply for this policy, right? Yes. And if, say, I passed in 2020, I'm a 2020 batch engineer, then can I apply for the next cohort? I read that you need to have around 2 years of experience, 2 years. Yes. So for 2022, I can apply because I graduated last year.
But then you have 1 year of work experience, right? Because you're also doing this program now.
Yeah, I have 12 months. And after that,
work experience, you are absolutely eligible to apply.
And do they look at past academic records also, or it's just straightforward?
Academic research, for both our programs, ISC and YLT, we are primarily looking at your application process, right? So there's an innovation proposal to fill, and then there's like behavioral interviews that you have to go through, which is we basically make a decision with that, not on previous academic scores.
Thank you, ma'am.
Prajita, you have your hand up.
Hello, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. For the normal IIC fellowship, so in that case, we do require a like 5 years degree, like 3 plus 2. If we are doing bachelor's, we are going through bachelor's. So in that,
We don't. You only need to have an undergrad degree and 2 years of work experience. We don't require a master's degree for either.
okay, okay. And ma'am, the second question I have is what is like the stipend for the whole fellowship?
So for both the programs, the stipend is 12 lakhs 70,000, I believe. So roughly a lakh a month.
Okay. And ma'am, the third question which I have is like apart from the government sectors and the consultancy, what are the other opportunities which IIC provides?
So we are fundamentally a government fellowship where the idea is to really give you an experience of working within the government sector. We have some projects which we do with large scale foundations or NGOs. We've done projects in the past with Seva Bharat. We're currently doing a project with the Swasti, which is a large scale health NGO. So we do have them, but I would say that 95% of our projects are with the government.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, Rajat, I see Shivani Sharma.
Hello, ma'am. How are you?
Doing good.
Okay, so I am 2018 pass out. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I have 2 years of work experience in International Zinc Association. And last year, 2020, I lost my job due to COVID-19 pandemic. And after that, I thought I had to, I was looking for the job, something in, like in consultancies, for example, or think tanks, and somewhat related to technology rather than any NGO or something. So I found ISPP, but now as you have given your presentation and I saw that there was, the chance that I could have, if I would have applied in April or May to IIC, so I would have, maybe I would have made it. So, but because I'm taking admission in ISPP, so next year, what we should do, like, because it will be on, your application starts at April and May, right? And somebody like me wants to join. So again, I have to take like 2 years. I mean, I want to say that 1 year of studies and then again applying. So is there any case like I can apply this year?
No, I would highly recommend that you finish your ISPP program. It's a great program, and I think it will help you like really gear up and learn a lot that will enable you to perform well at ISC. We had Himanshu from ISPP join us last year, and we've had a fantastic experience with him, and he's continuing with us for another year. And this year, we've just made a couple of offers to ISPP scholars, and so generally we think very highly of ISPP and the talent it provides. And I think the way we're structured, we are actually structured to complement this, right? So we would open our applications in March when you would be close to finishing your program, and then you would, we do interviews all through June and make offers in July, which is just about the time people graduate. So it's actually very complementary. And I highly recommend that you apply next March or April when the applications open.
So do you prefer, people from ISPP over other people who join? Who may apply
based on the application process. People apply from everywhere. Everybody will have to go through the same application process regardless of their background or education.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am.
Look forward to your application. Hi, I see Rachna on my screen.
Hi, Shreya. So, okay, just a second. Yeah. So I just wanted to understand when you talk about 2 years of work experience, so what all do you accept in that? Like our fellowships or, like, yeah.
So typically, yes, absolutely. Like we have a lot of people that come to us from TFI. So, I think 30% of our cohort every year is TFI, and then the other 30% is YIF. We do normally look at it again. Typically with TFI, I would say it's usually TFI plus 1 or 2 years of experience because the experience is fairly similar, right? The 2 years at
I don't have TFI experience.
Oh, I'm just explaining for the larger groups. But yes, fellowship absolutely counts, like CMGGA or etc. All of those count.
Right. Thanks. Thank you.
No problem. Pranav? Hi, Pranav Mangad. I see your hand raised. I see Tejasvi Bhaskar. You can come back to Pranav.
Is it okay if we take Tejasvi in a bit? Because he's already had a chance. Can we go for Samyak?
I lost track.
No worries at all.
So I see Samyak.
Yeah. Hi everyone. So I just had a query. Like, I don't have a work experience as such as of now. I've just completed my bachelor's in sociology honors from Miranda House, and I have interned with a few. Like, I have interned with Hindustan Petroleum last year, and I have been interning with Teach for India as their recruitment intern for now. So, like, the work experience eligibility, is that compulsory, or it's just it will just give a better look for the resume? Like,
we're pretty particular about having at least minimum 2 years. To be really honest, most of the cohort is like 4 to 5 years of work experience.
Okay.
So 2-year minimum is fairly strict. We do sometimes also have other roles. So like last year we had 2 research associates that we had taken for our data and tech project at MIT. So there's certain roles we do open up. We also actually have a bunch of internal roles. So like we have program manager roles that keep opening up at ISC all the time, right? So sometimes people join us as ISC program managers and then graduate to the fellowship a year later. So there are always options open, but we would pretty much hold the 2 years quite strongly.
Okay. Thank you so much.
I see Pranav's hand up.
Hello, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm basically a computer engineer. I had a question related to eligibility. I have worked as a mentor and educator in an NGO's leadership development center for the last 4 years, where we also kind of compulsorily discuss the policies which impact India, including economics and all the other disciplines. So, so I wanted to ask if I'm eligible for both the programs, because my experience is in the NGO sector only, but I was also interested in the tech program.
No,
and I also completed
to apply to both. Like I said, you'll have to go through the process, but from an eligibility perspective, it's your and people do apply to both programs, right? We would like to understand the motivation, in interviews, but we do have people who apply to both programs.
Okay, so I meant if the training experience counts or not. Like, I worked as a trainer.
No, I think we would count that as a work experience. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Pankuri?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening. So I just wanted to ask whether the unpaid internship also counts as work experience by any chance, like.
Unpaid work experience? Yeah, I mean, I think if it was a proper job, I don't think that we ask if it was paid or unpaid.
Okay, because I'm currently working with Praja Foundation, but they don't pay me. Like, it's an unpaid thing, so that's not an issue, right?
No, it's not an issue.
Thank you.
No problem. Akash?
Hello, ma'am.
I see two Akash. Sorry, yes, Akash.
Yeah, hello, ma'am.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, hello, ma'am. Actually, my confusion is regarding the fellowship is for 2 years, right?
So the IIC fellowship is for a year. The Young Leaders in Tech Policy Fellowship is for 2 years.
Okay, so after 1 year, what will be the future aspects of that, future prospects and everything?
So, I mean, people do different things, right? You actually, a lot of people now choose
Yeah.
to stay back in IIC for another year, based obviously on performance. People go study. I think that's one of the more common options right now. So a lot of people would go and, go get their masters.
Okay.
And then just people look at multiple different options in the sector, right? And some of them join the organizations that we work with, with the government or the foundations. Like I said earlier, ISC has alumni in a lot of different organizations in the country today. So there is an opportunity for them to go, and they do, right? Like a lot of alumni reach out and hire. We we help a lot of people in many ways. Like there's just a lot of people that reach out to us and say, when your fellows are graduating, please kind of share their resumes. And fellows are fairly in demand in the social sector, so we do help in getting people placed. We've never really had an
That's what my question is, that IISc do involve in getting help for the placements, or
I wouldn't say we have a very structured career center like ISPP does, where there's somebody whose dedicated role is to help. But I just feel like through the network, it's usually not a problem.
Okay, and then which type of companies after the 1-year fellowship can we go into?
It could be, anything depending on you, right? So a lot of people go work in the government directly. We've had people who work at consulting firms such as BCG, ID Insights. We have people who've joined, multilateral organizations like World Bank, IFC. We've had people join organizations like Pathwani, AI, foundations like Cisco, Rockefeller. It could be anything.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
So it says the just you can go next.
Okay, ma'am. I've already asked one question. I'd like to ask another one. You said that 1 year of work experience is the bare minimum eligibility, and then 2 years. You need to have worked 2 years after graduating.
Pretty typically. Normally, we would say if you've had a master's program in 1 year, it should be fine.
Yeah, I mean, if I have, say, 1 year of ISPP and 1 year of work experience, then would that suffice?
You're eligible to apply, yes.
Yeah, okay. And this might be a little too early to ask, but you said that the majority of the work that IIC does is with, say, Ministry of Health or with organizations like Niti Aayog. So where exactly does the office of IIC lie? I mean, would all the fellows be working in and around the NCR or in other areas too?
No, so I think in the last 2 years, or last year or so, it's been a little bit like that a lot of our projects have been in Delhi. But a year and a half, in 2019, we had 2 projects in Delhi. We had 2 projects in Hyderabad. We had one in Madhya Pradesh, one in Gujarat, one in Punjab, one in Rajasthan, right? So we were fairly spread out. So it's very annually dependent. Right now, this year, we will have projects in Delhi, we will have projects in Hyderabad, in Lucknow, in Indore, right? So we would have projects. So it really depends on that year. There's no pre-structure to this.
And as I understand it, that although the eligibility criteria is 2 years or 1 year with a PGP, you prefer somebody having extensive work experience, something to the tune of 4 or 5 years.
Very clear. Honestly, you'll be surprised at the diversity of the cohort, because we really do look at the application and the interview, right? So at that point of time, when we're interviewing or reviewing, we really don't try to consider what you've done before. It's really how well you've written your application or how well you've done in the interview. So we're making offers as of right now. We made an offer to somebody who's got 5 or 6 years of experience. We've also made an offer to somebody who's got 2 years of work experience, and they just performed extremely well on the interview.
And how many fellows do you take usually every year, approximately?
It really varies depending, because depends on the number of people that choose to stay back in that year. It depends on the number of projects we get. We are not very a lot of fellowships like CMGG, etc., very structured and say this is the number of people. We are very flexible, so it really depends on year to year. But I would say roughly every year we end up taking, say, 10 to 12 people minimum for IIC, and then 5 for in Wildly. It's more structured. It's 5 per year.
Thank you, ma'am.
Let's see if Rajita.
Yes, hello, ma'am. I just asked few questions, and again, actually, ma'am, another question is like the 2-year work experience, as you said, that it can be a 1 year's master's program also. So, like, I have a 2 years of part-time work experience with few internships and few months of full-time work experience.
We would
And
normally not count the internships in between, things as full-time work.
internships are not counted.
Normally not as full-time.
Even apart from the internship, I have worked as a part-time. I have worked as a freelance worker.
You would usually not count that as well.
Okay, so it needs to be full-time experience. Okay. Oh, thank you, ma'am.
Nidhi.
Hi, I know that you have been talking about the minimum amount of work experience that you require. I just want to ask, is there a cap on the maximum amount of experience a person can have? Are you looking at a range or something?
Unfortunately, Nidhi, we do a bit, and this is a little bit, we don't really have a scientific reason why we did this, but we had to, because we call it a young professionals program, we have an upper age limit actually of 30, not experience. So somebody who's up to about 29 is eligible to apply, but post 30, we don't accept application.
No, that's fine. It does make a good deal amount of sense. That's fine. That's fine. Just want to check.
Yes,
Thank you.
experience doesn't matter, but age, unfortunately.
Yes, of course it would. Of course it would. Thank you.
Okay. I mean, I'm also happy to talk outside the program. If there are any questions, I believe everybody's just kind of, I'm assuming a lot of people don't actually come from development or policy sector. So if there are any just questions outside of the actual application process or the two programs, I'm also happy to answer those. Yes, go ahead, Teachers.
Ma'am, is there any branch criteria when it comes to the Tech Leaders Fellowship? Like, do you only consider certain branches of engineering, or any and everybody who has a bachelor's of technology degree is eligible?
Is it?
Anybody?
That's right. No problem at all. See a question in the chat. Role of program. No, actually, that's right. The program managers don't have, but the program managers typically are people actually, in fact, younger. There are maybe a year or 2 years out, or with 2 years of work experience, and they, yeah, but they don't. None of the management roles actually have any kind of age limit.
Thank you so much, Cher. That was really lovely of you to answer all the questions very patiently. I had a question. So just assuming that it has been such a difficult year, and I know that IIC has been doing some fantastic work with the Ministry of Health. Would you like to talk a little bit about it? What has that been like working with the Ministry of Health? In what ways have the fellows actually impacted the whole management of COVID situation? That would be really nice to hear.
Sure, absolutely happy to. So, interestingly, in 2019, I think we started working with the Ministry of Health in the e-health division, right? We started working with Joint Secretary Lava Agarwal, and we were working on international health programs and e-health programs. Digital health is a big area of interest to IIC. And then, when pandemic hit, it coincidentally happened that, JS Lava Agarwal was also responsible for emergency medical response that fell under his domain. And very quickly in like Jan, beginning Feb, before people even were really thinking about COVID in India, our team started thinking about this, right? Because his office started thinking, and practically everybody who was working with his office was immediately pulled into working on emergency medical response and thinking about COVID protocols. And it's really interesting. It was really interesting to see because there were very structured protocols immediately, like XYZ needs to happen the minute something like this happens. It's not the first time India has had a epidemic, right? It's the first time in our lifetime we've had a pandemic, but we've had epidemics, right? And there's very clear protocols of what needs to happen, and we started putting those into place almost immediately. Very quickly, we kind of started testing and blocking passengers from China, etc., right? So the team transitioned completely into being a COVID response team. We had our donor partner Rockefeller at the point of time, who was extremely supportive and said, yes, please do whatever you need to do. We are 100% supportive of our effort for this. But the requirement was so massive, we actually couldn't function with just that amount of teams. So we actually reached out to Gopi and everybody else at ISP and said, we need more support, right? And they were very, very fortunate to have partners such as this who were able to immediately put down this request at ISPP and said that, we are looking for 4 or 5 more volunteers to support us at the work here. And that's how, we had Himanshu and a bunch of other people actually joined that team. and work directly from Mr. Love Agarwal's office. And this was the days when there was complete lockdown, complete paranoia. We didn't know what was happening. But, everybody just stepped up to say that this is what, we will go, right? Like, so everybody was hiding inside, but this team was working from the ministry 7 days a week, 14 to 15 hours a day. It was the most incredible effort I've seen any team pull through, right? And the work was to actually see how a country as big as India responds to a pandemic was incredibly interesting, right? So I think they would do everything from writing press briefs and press releases to actually like looking and saying, wait, which countries? So one of the responsibilities would be to say in which country what search is happening. Like every day the numbers of what is globally happening needed to be at the GS's desk, which then needed to go to like the chief secretary's desk, right? So all of that work, bunch of like understanding of overnight we became experts in like epidemiology, right? And we were like, wait, what does all of this mean, right? We were obviously not going to be making predictions, but collating predictions that other people were doing and then presenting it back to the ministry to be able to take decisions, right? There were a bunch of protocols that needed to be immediately thought through, right? Which is like, how do you handle COVID deaths, right? What are the protocols around cremation and usage and handling? What is transportation norms? Like there were just so many small things which today, like when we had the second lockdown, were already in place, but every single one of those actually had to be thought of at that point of time, put into a press brief and put out into the system. So I think the team that worked on that had the most incredible experience. It was maybe never again, hope never again we would have to go through something like that, but they really, obviously it's not as if we were able to think through everything, unfortunately, right? I think that's when some of the gaps in policy decision making also comes out very clearly, because it's a domino effect. You come down and you make one policy decision, and then you have to think through it. What is this one policy decision going to impact on every other thing that is in place? And something simple like we all saw this, and everybody said that, wait, why didn't the government think about the migrant population, right? I mean, it's like, okay, we did lockdown because we said that we need to control this disease. We didn't at that point in time know how infectious it was, right? Nobody knew. So we said, wait, we need to get systems into place. We need to get labs into place. We need to get, multiple things into place. So let's figure out lockdown. Now that decision was taken by the health ministry, but then parallelly, it affected almost everything else, right? It affects, like we saw migrant labor, it affects industry, it affects transportation, it affects, NEA. So how do all of these ministries come together? How do you actually come to a consensus on what needs to be done and what would be the ramification of what needs to be done? It's so complex that I think it's easy in hindsight to think that, why were we not able to think about it? But, being there, having been through that, it was, there were really tough calls to take at that point of time to try to figure out what needs to be done. Now, I want to be super careful and say that this is May 2020. We were not part of the decision-making team, and we weren't really part of any of these decisions in May 2021. And I think some of the decisions that were taken at this point in time, none of us were at that point of time a COVID response team, and we're not part of those decisions.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing that, Shreya. That is been one of the things that I have always been so impressed with, and I really wanted to hear more on that. Rachna, I see your hand is raised. Do you have a question on that?
Yeah. So, Shreya, I just wanted to understand. I've worked with a few grassroots organizations, like very remote, and there I've witnessed a lot of reluctance from people of power to be, acknowledging the underprivileged or even the problems that they face. But for the last 1 hour, I hear you and I understand that things are really not the way that they are in other areas. So what has been the challenge that you face in terms of collaborating with people who are the decision makers? Have you faced any reluctance, any like lack of empathy or anything, or has it been a smooth partnership?
No, I mean, I don't think so. So first of all, I would say that I think it really depends on who your partner is, right? I think, and that's something we've learned over the years. We've had some very bad projects where our government partner that we chose to put a team with was maybe not the best, right? And I think that really depends on that. If you which we now do. We do enough research and background research and understanding and spend enough time understanding who that actual core person. So the ministry and the project might be interesting, but if the JS or the principal secretary you're working with is not as dynamic, the team will have a hard time, right? Because there might be risk averseness, there might be a resistance to change, there might be a different thought process, which we will not be able to influence as much. Also, unfortunately, sometimes, Rachana, what happens is just the way our bureaucracy is structured. We might go into the project and have a great partner, and like 4 months into the project, the partner gets transferred, our senior bureaucrat gets transferred into a different project. We actually do now try to solve for that and kind of check and see how much tenure of that bureaucrat is left, but sometimes these decisions are taken anyways, right? We'd been working in Karnataka on a universal health coverage program for 2 years, and then Karnataka went into election, and the government changed, and the new government came and was like, do we do this program or not? And there was complete policy paralysis for at least 6 to 8 months at that point of time, which is practically the entire period of a fellow. So, then we were in education in Rajasthan for 4 years, and then the government changed, and the new government came in and said that, oh, but these are the previous government's policies. We don't know if we want to continue that. So unfortunately, those kind of things happen more frequently than they should. But I think what we've learned over the years is you need to pick your partner correctly. You need to be very careful in what you're committing to. I think some of the other things we've learned is also projects that succeed need to have an intent from the government. And that means both in terms of people who are committed and champions that are committed to making it happen, as well as some kind of financial commitment to that project, right? So there are many really interesting and cool projects that we've tried to push, and we've been fairly successful in convincing senior stakeholders that these need to happen, but we've not managed to get any sum of money allocated, so they've not succeeded. On the flip side, we've also had a lot of projects which have come with, commission this much money and this needs to happen, but we've not managed to find the right set of champions that really understand why this needs to be done and push it. So what we now try to do very carefully is think about the projects that have a combination of both these things, like say the National Center for AI, which is just one of my favorite examples because we have a great stakeholder and we also have commitment from the central ministry that we really need to do this, right? So that project will move through very, very smoothly. We previously worked on projects like the Women's Entrepreneurship Platform, which, again, was a project that had a lot of buy-in from NITI Aayog and, was able to be launched at a pretty big scale. So just being careful of this, but I mean, I would not say that it's all smooth sailing at all.
Thank you for sharing your experience here.
Absolutely. Tejasvi?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, you said that while IIC doesn't have as structured a placement cell as ISPP or say CM or any other PGP program, it does help its fellows to find other opportunities right after graduating. Now, let's say that somebody becomes passionate about IIC itself. During the course of the fellowship, they decide that I want to work for IIC for even more years after completing their 2-year fellowship. So would they be given a preference if they apply for program managers, or even for that, everything starts from ground zero?
No, so in fact, I think over the last 2 years, we've had multiple people that we promoted. So not to program manager, I think the hierarchy is program manager to fellow to engagement manager.
Okay.
But we've had, previously we've had Robin who joined as a project associate and then was promoted to project lead and then was engagement manager till we left last month. We've had Disha in a similar journey. And just recently we promoted Vivek, who joined again as a project associate, was a project lead last year in the National Digital Health Mission, just got promoted last month. And he'll be managing all the digital health programs at ISC. So that is absolutely a possibility. We very rarely hire externally. We prefer to grow talent from within. There's a lot of culture. We are very passionate about the culture of IIC, right? That's very important to us. So, people who we've groomed, who've been in the system, who understand what is it that we're trying to do and trying to achieve, that's who we would like to kind of grow to management positions and help us as IIC grow as well.
So what exactly is the hierarchy? I mean, I thought that the lowest position was that of a fellow. I mean, is the starting point?
managers are just different, right? So they are like, so
Okay.
like you just hired somebody, Pranay as a program manager, and Pranay's role is different, right? So it's a lot of like leadership, like the training, the development of the leadership, the managing of the program, right? So that's a very different level. The otherwise, yes. So you have the fellows, you come in as a fellow for a year or 2 years, then you can get promoted to a project lead position, and then you can get promoted to an engagement manager position. And then hopefully you can get promoted to a country director position.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shreya. Thank you so much. I think we have also arrived to the end of this session. Just wanted to say that thank you so much, not just for the session, but just for the mere representation in the leadership, because even though policy space is up and growing, the representation for women is still very scarce. So you being someone who's at that position, I think it's great signaling for everyone, including me, who's just starting out their career in the space. Both as a teacher and the alumna and a staff at ISPP, I think this is absolutely wonderful, and we are absolutely delighted to have you come and speak to us whenever you do. Thank you for doing everything that you do share. Is it okay if we take a picture with you for our social media?
Absolutely. And I just want to add to what you said, Mayuri. Thank you so much for inviting me. And, always happy and always excited to interact with ISPP scholars. But ISC actually has more than 50% representation in management with women, right? We're like at 60% management of women. And we very, very strongly promote diversity within our cohort. We normally have more women in our cohort than men as well. So absolutely strongly believe that.
Thank you so much, Shreya. Thank you. Scholars, may I please request you to switch on your videos just for this one time so that I can click a picture with her.
Yeah, it's lovely to see everyone. Hopefully we can actually do something in person this year.
Super. Hey, cheese. Thank you. Just give me 1 second. All right, just gonna get one more quick picture. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Shreya.
Thank you.